Mr. Crowley, may I ask you about the nature of the travel alert? Of course, we've seen from 911, the U.S. has been issuing continuously different kinds of travel alerts for its citizens around the world. But what is the level of this travel alert? How serious is it?
Well, there's an affirmative obligation in the United States by law that if the government has security concerns, and it finds a way to communicate those concerns, to its citizens. And as your report suggested, there's a very, very difficult balance that's trying to be achieved here. We're trying to tell our citizens, continue to do what you want. If you are a football fan, of course, attend the European Games, but understand that as we did see in the Paris attack, the militants tried to get inside, a football stadium with France and Germany playing a friendly, and there's nothing new about this. Sadly, go back to the 1972 Olympics. Obviously, the Black September organization attacked the Israeli Olympic team, and so ever since then, at major sporting events like this, it is a target of opportunity for militants, and in some way, this public demonstration of vigilance can ideally make this a much more difficult target to attack.
We have noticed that even the French defense minister this time are going to Asia to attend the Shangri-La dialogue for this year. Of course, that's a gathering of all the defense ministers. Mr. Crowley, one could argue this is really another step that France and some of the European countries are taking in order to make sure there can be more collaboration of securities during the Euro 2016. But how much can the other countries do outside the European continent to help?
Well, I think for major events, looking ahead to the the Rio Games coming up in a few weeks. On the one hand, we have this challenge of the Zika virus, but on the other hand, the countries in and around the Olympic site, together with all of the others who are participating in the games, will be collaborating to try to determine if they sense any chatter, as we call it in the intelligence world, that would suggest that there's an active plot against the game. So I think sadly this is the environment in which we live, and major sporting events are a ripe target for militants who might try to send a message for a variety of reasons to a variety of countries.
Right, indeed. Now I'm told by my producer we are having a French panelist joining us from Paris, Professor Joav Toker from the American Graduate School in Paris. Professor Toker, welcome to our program. This is the third time, Professor, France will host the European Football Championship. A total of 2.5 million spectators are expected in the stadium for the games, with 1 million foreign visitors due to arrive in France, and a total of 51 matches taking place in 10 venues across France. This is a big security project we are talking about. Given France past the brief history over the past 2 years about terrorist attacks and some of the disconnections in terms of intelligence sharing, how confident are you about the security situation this time during the Euro 2016?
Well, it's very difficult to give sort of a global answer to that, especially 1 week before the first match kicks on, and on television, namely, everything could be proven and re-illustrated later on. But I would say in a synthetic way that yes, France is ready. France is also conscious of how shaky that kind of readiness might be, because we're speaking about a very different kind of enemy. We're speaking, some French specialists say right now, about sort of neo-terrorism, new terrorism type, in which the types of surprises, not only on the operational level in terms of security and intelligence, but also in terms of imagining new types of targets, new types of operational modes.
Right.
All these constitute some kind of confrontation which is rather sharp and which could unfortunately include some very unpleasant surprises. But when you look at the terrain, when you look at the concrete efforts, when you look at the way the gendarmerie, the special police forces the extra manpower which had been mobilized over the last 18 months in France and elsewhere in Europe are preparing concretely those 4 weeks of football games, then one should be overall rather confident.
Well, Professor Toker, I have to ask you about this. Yes, indeed, there are 15% increase of the budget when it comes to security during this time's Euro 2016. There's also 90,000 personnel, 90,000 we are talking about, all over France, trying to guarantee the security of this big specific event. But this is really the biggest soft target, one could argue, for the year when it comes to the calculation of the terrorists. How much do we know? Of course, you're not an intelligence officer, but how much do we know about the way that the terrorists operate, given the previous experiences of France, the incidents happened there, and how much can France and other countries do at the time when you also have so many different kinds of crises, even involving migration?
You're right, things could be interconnected here, well beyond the immediate confrontation between those minds, if I may say so, who try to plan as much damage as possible in terms of terrorism and the counter-terrorism effort. But you see, my colleague in Washington said a few minutes ago in the conversation, you know, these are the times we're living in. So it's part of an overall reality, which indeed is a security reality with all the unpredictable elements. It is a political reality as well, because football is politics. As a matter of fact, a very specific type of political event which indeed unites societies in a way which is rather unique in comparison to some many others political events on the nation's or on a continent's agenda. So yes, these new days of ours right now do include in their, how should I say, quality of life, quote unquote, ingredients, fear and anxiety and unpredictable elements which may rise out of terrorist malicious activities. This is part of our day's reality. So it should be integrated. It is indeed integrated in the overall image, and this is why I say that the fact that the overall feeling in...
If that is the fact,
go ahead.
If that is the fact and reality people have to accept, then there has to be mechanisms and also ways to deal with it, at least to the extent as much as we can. Therefore, Mr. Crowley, how much of intelligence sharing, both mechanism-wise and also in terms of operation and implementation, can be done during this very intense 1 month inside Europe between the United States, which is well known for its intelligence capabilities, and also its European counterparts?
Well, I think intelligence sharing is vital to this. It can always be improved, and I think that in the aftermath of what we've seen in Paris and Brussels, also here in the United States, there's an acceleration of that intelligence sharing effort, recognizing that you have, different legal constructs that authorities have to overcome. I think I think we have to understand the threat a little bit in terms of, you're trying to identify and interdict, specific networks like we saw who were responsible for the Paris attacks and the Brussels airport attack. On the other hand, you're also dealing with self-activated individuals who may be connected to a militant group like the Islamic State by social media, and their message is attack what you can get to wherever you are in whatever form that you can. If we think back to the Sochi Olympics in 2014, the site itself was well protected, but there was some terrorist activity in the weeks leading up to the games, railroad stations being hit and so forth. So in this particular case in Europe, for example, just in the last couple of days, you had a plot that was detected and intercepted in Germany. So these militants don't necessarily have to get to the various stadia in France. They can just find a way, because the focus will be on Europe in the coming days, attack Europe wherever it can, in whatever form it can, to try to gain the kind of attention that they're looking for.
Professor Toker, therefore, that's a very important question that we are talking about. That is whether France, during this one intense month, will pick up all the clues coming from its allies, both inside Europe and elsewhere. And related to that, how to avoid overreaction, because that could be another extreme that the efforts could go and eventually could destroy the fun of the game. So very delicate balance, it seems, Professor Toker.
Right you are. Very delicate balance indeed. This is precisely where those who are the decision makers, let them be within the security, intelligence or political community, this is in their hands. How do you balance things intelligently, and how far can you stretch risks that you take, calculated risks which you eliminate? Because the problem is not only the cooperation between different intelligence services in Europe and elsewhere in America and elsewhere, it's also the kind of intelligence you apply on the data you accumulate. Namely, where is it that you really think that what you have in front of your eyes in terms of proofs or indications is really on operational grounds, and therefore you do something concrete about it. And because the amount and the dimensions of and the quantity of information is huge, this is part of, yes, a political sort of judgment, which is not limited to the domain of those who are the professional security executives. And the balances are delicate, and when the errors unfortunately might be taken, it may exceed that perimeter that we are familiar with right now, and this is precisely the risk, the calculated risk.
Okay, and Mr. Crowley, all of these are happening not only with the existence of terrorism, with the ever increasing security budget inside Europe, and also the migration crisis inside Europe. It is also going hand in hand with some of those scandals concerning soccer worldwide, and Europe is not an exception. So it seems that there are so many layers all at the same time, adding pressure to the security, in a way, efforts by all countries, particularly France. How much do you think the French government will be able to, together with allies inside Europe, handle this with all different layers of pressures?
Well, you loaded a lot into that question.
Yes,
I mean, let's put aside the corruption issues that FIFA is trying to deal with. Yeah, but I would simply say, there's a larger responsibility for us who are sports fans or football fans, and that we should celebrate these games that will be coming up. Not just in France with football, but in Rio, with the Olympics. If these are things that militants think are Western and somehow represent the infidel, non-believer community, the best thing that we can do is have these games go on, have people celebrate them, welcome the excitement on the pitch. And let them come off. And should something tragic happen, I think what has been inspiring to us all, whether it's the Charlie Hebdo attacks or the attacks a year ago in Paris, is how the French people themselves, responded to this. They were not going to be intimidated by these extremists, and it's that kind of message back to the militants that ultimately, moves them, appropriately, to be seen as a fringe group and something that the larger community has to ultimately combat.